All right, so I've got a very specific question for you all today. And let me tell you, it's a doozy. Most of you are going to hate this question, like really hate it. And some of you might even hate me for just asking it. So you might be witnessing me setting fire to my channel today. But there is something that is true about me, and I think it might be true about you too if you're here. And that is, I'm never really satisfied with surface level answers. And that's why I always try to dig deeper until I find something that feels like truth. And most of you have been with me as I explored what narcissism is and really looks like from basically every possible angle. And you may have noticed that my focus lately has slowly yet steadily been shifting towards the one thing that I believe matters in all of this, and that's healing. And so I woke up one morning with a question on my heart. It was something that I had never even remotely considered before, but there it was. So you know how once you say something, it can't be unsaid, right? Well, I don't know that I've ever experienced this exact thing before, but this was like a thought that couldn't be unthought. It was going to linger there in the back of my mind until I gave it some attention. And so I did. But right about now, I can basically hear some few keyboard warriors out there in the comments screaming in all caps for me to just ask the question already. But unfortunately, this one isn't that simple. In order for most of you to be even open to hearing the question, we do need some context. And we're going to start out with a discussion of self-love, but don't worry. I'll do my best to keep it interesting as we make our way towards the bigger question. So let's jump into that. Right now, right in this moment, if someone were to ask you if you fully loved yourself, what would you say? For me, I'd probably say no. I mean, that word fully in the question makes that question pretty loaded, doesn't it? I mean, fully, like there's no room for anything else but love. Like we're talking about pure, unadulterated, fiercely unconditional love. And I don't think I'm there yet. And if we're all being honest with ourselves, I think most people aren't there yet. So now let's talk about how all of this relates to healing. So you might sometimes hear me say that healing is a lifelong journey, and I do still believe that. But there's a connection between healing and self-love that's becoming very clear to me as I've been pulling at this thread. So I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I've come to the conclusion that I've been thinking about self-love all wrong. Maybe we all have. And if you look at the self-love content out there, it's all about doing, right? So you'll find videos like 5 Steps to Self-Love. And the content is about setting boundaries, journaling, and exploring your interests. And while those things are incredibly important, they frame self-love as something we have to work towards, as if self-love is an action. But maybe it's not. Maybe self-love is what's left over after we've healed. And I know that sounds super abstract. So let's look at an analogy. So think of self-love like a light that shines out from within you. When you're born, it's shining brighter than ever because there are no babies out there who hate themselves, right? But over time, life piles things in front of that light, talking about things like shame, resentment, and fear of not being enough. Every wound becomes something that blocks or bends that light. And the process of healing becomes the process of removing those obstructions. And not for the purpose of creating new light, but for the purpose of letting that original light shine through. So I don't think of self-love as an action. It's more like a state of being. And not only that, maybe it's our natural state of being. But we'll also notice that even when life tries to bury it, that light is resilient. Because every time it was obstructed by pain, it found a way to bend around the obstruction. There's evidence of this in some of our best qualities. We're talking about things like independence, empathy, intuition, bravery, and the list goes on. You are who you are today because of what you've been through. And even if your self-love meter isn't hitting full capacity, I know there's plenty of light still shining through. So the ultimate goal is to remove all obstacles that are blocking the light. And I think in theory, we're all on board with that idea. But in reality, we all have obstacles that we're not quite ready to let go of yet. So we protect them. And we bury them in layers and layers of anger, and maybe even some hatred. And we can be super protective about our anger. And there's good reason for that. But I'm really not one to demonize anger. I actually made a video recently about how anger can be a super powerful tool in your healing process. If you missed that, I recommend checking it out. I'll link to it in the card and the description. You see, anger truly is a sacred emotion, and it's meant to spark a fire inside of you. And that fire is supposed to help free you and then move through you. But today, here and now, I want to talk about what happens when anger digs in its heels and sets up camp, because we know that happens too. So what happens when anger doesn't move? Well, anger shows up to keep you from feeling something that's too heavy to touch, right? It's like grief, betrayal, or maybe helplessness. And hate is anger's final form. It gives you a target. It gives you control. And it gives you something to hold on to when everything else feels too raw to face. And for a while, that feels powerful. It certainly feels safer than pain ever did, right? But it's like an airtight seal around an old wound. It keeps the infection from spilling out, but it also keeps it from healing. And here's the thing. Science actually backs this up. Psychologists call anger a secondary emotion, which basically means it shows up to protect you from something that feels even worse underneath. Things like grief, fear, or shame. And Dr. Les Greenberg, who helped pioneer emotion-focused therapy, describes anger as a kind of emotional armor. When we feel powerless or hurt, anger steps in to make us feel strong again. It's your nervous system saying, I can't afford to fall apart right now, so I'll just fight instead. And there's even brain science to support that too. When we're emotionally hurt, the same part of the brain that reacts to physical pain, the amygdala, lights up. So the body treats emotional injury like a threat, and anger becomes part of the fight response. So when we hold on to anger for years, it's often because the body never got to finish that fight. The original wound never fully healed. It just got sealed. And that's why the anger stays. But the longer you hold it, the more it starts to hold you, because that hate doesn't stay out there with them. It lives in here, inside the same space as your light. And it keeps you connected to the very person you're trying to escape. It's like they still live rent-free in your nervous system, even if you haven't seen them in years. Because when your nervous system still reacts to the thought of them, when they can still spark anger in your body, that means they still exist inside your emotional landscape. And your reaction keeps their influence alive because your sense of self is still defined in opposition to them. And for a lot of us, there are actually two ways this sense of self is formed. There's who you had to become to survive them, and then there's who you decided to become in spite of them. And both are powerful. But here's the problem. If you're still holding on to anger or hatred, those parts of you that were born in the fire still revolve around them. And because of that, things like strength are not rooted in true power. They're rooted in the belief that you need strength in order to protect yourself from some lurking danger. But when you finally heal those wounds, that all changes. Then you can own and integrate those qualities like strength that were born from pain and trauma. And then you can feel strong because you know your power, not because you need defense against some enemy. So I'll leave you with this, the big question. Can you fully love yourself if you still hate the person who made you who you are? And I'm going to be real with you here. I don't know the answer. Maybe none of us do yet, but it might be the question that shows where the next layer of healing begins. Because if you'd asked me a few weeks ago, I'd have said, yes, of course you can. But now I'm not so sure. I still believe that anger has its place, very much so, especially while you're healing. But if we're only hating and not healing anymore, that hatred is only keeping the wound alive. And I'd love to know what you think about all of this. I know it opens a major can of worms for a lot of you. And I want to be crystal clear that I am not asking anyone to forgive and forget, nor am I asking anyone to actively try to release their anger. Please don't do either of those things. But I'm thinking maybe it's time we start paying attention to our anger as a sign or a signal of what might be waiting to be healed. Maybe as a sign that there are still obstructions that are blocking our light. In the end, I think hatred is the symptom and healing is the remedy. And if you're realizing that you're ready to stop fighting the past and start rebuilding from a place of peace, that's the exact work we do in coaching. So click here to learn more and schedule a session. Or if you're in the stage where you feel your anger is still supporting you and you want to learn more about that, click here to see how you can use your anger to support real change. Be sure to like this video before you go, and I'll see you next time.